Welcome to the Common Sense Show. I'm your host, Micah, but you know who I am already. I don't have to reintroduce myself. Before we get into our conversation with Mark Elwood, I want to just do a few housekeeping things. Don't forget, I not only do I post the new podcasts that we're doing here, independent, separate shows as well. I also have articles that I write for Forbes that come out. If you want to get subscribed and notified for everything that I'm doing, make sure you go to commonsenseshow.locals.com. That's commonsenseshow.locals.com and sign up to be a part of the Common Sense community. There, you'll be able to get notified for everything I do. And then in case I start doing special lives, which I might, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the business world right now. I might do some commentary with some live streaming on some of the business issues that are kind of afoot at the moment. But I kind of want, I am very interested in tackling the NAR settlement with the realtors. So you have to stay tuned for that, but I have to watch what I say because I also have a real estate license. So I have to be very, very careful, but I'll let you know how that goes. Anyways, without further ado, today we're talking about getting unstuck. You may be in a career that you love. You may not be. You may want to change. You may want to start a small business. Sometimes that can be overwhelming. Today we're talking to Mark Elwood, who is a specialist in unsticking people. He's the man with the stick that pulls you out of the mud. And he's here to talk to us today about that. So without further ado, I always say or do, we're going to bring Mark in. Mark, welcome to the Common Sense Show.
How you doing, Micah? Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So, Mark, I gave a little bit about who you are, but why don't you actually go a little deeper and tell the individuals who are listening or watching a little bit more about yourself, 7 pillars, what is exactly that you do to get people unstuck?
Yeah, well, to give it some context, I think my entire career was spent in the technical staffing space. And for most of that time, I was the owner of my own business. So over the course of 30 plus years, I've helped a lot of people find work, and I've helped a lot of companies find people. And then subsequently trained a lot of salespeople, trained a lot of recruiters. So was managing a lot of young people's careers and watched them grow and bump into stuff. You know, life comes at you. None of us are immune to that. And then my 3 children, who I raised as a single dad for quite some time, got out of school and they needed to find work, and they asked for my help. And as I was coaching them up, and then I helped them start their own companies, they all 3 looked at me and said, "Dad, you know stuff that no one else knows. You got to figure out a way to get this in front of more people." And they successfully got jobs for more money than they thought they were going to get, and they're all doing well with their companies. And so I started to consider turning it into a coaching approach. And even though everybody that I helped find work was at a crossroads, because you're not looking for work unless you're at some sort of a crossroads. And you know, it was a common theme. And very few people could articulate to me why they wanted to do something, or why they were doing what they were doing. And I found that a lot of people, and you may know this as well, that people are doing stuff in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that someone told them they should do in their 20s or their teens, and they just started doing it. You know, there wasn't a purpose, there wasn't a mission, there wasn't any passion behind it. And so I found myself, I made the transition into coaching. That's what 7 Pillars is. I help people in professional transition. I do leadership coaching, executive coaching. There really isn't any age group I can't help, but I find myself in the middle-aged man space right now because that's what I am. And, you know, as I started coaching people, so anyway, that 30-year career ended up in the sale of a company and a divorce. And there's a long story that I don't need to bore you with. But coming out the other end, I've been coaching quite a few people in both the leadership space and in the career transition space. And you could argue that they're one and the same. And when I start with anybody, it's always, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Is this what you want to be doing? The other thing that comes from that, Mike, is you find most people don't give themselves permission to dream. They put themselves in a box and they say, well, if I'm a project manager in the healthcare space today, all I can do is find a project management job in the healthcare space somewhere else. And that's just so not the case. And so the beginning of my coaching begins with that. Let's talk about what your life's purpose is. Why God put you on the face of this earth. Let's get deep. Let's get real before we start putting a resume together or start looking around. Let's get this down. And then the second thing we're going to do is once we figure that out together collectively, we're going to start telling that story. And you can't just start telling that story without practicing that. So we do quite a deep dive into that storytelling, because I think sales is storytelling. I think business is storytelling. So once those two things are done, I let people loose unless they want me to kind of handhold them through the interview process and the preparation process. But I'm no longer in the I'll find you a job business. So that's behind me. Now it's just getting you ready for that next professional step for you. So I'll throw it back to you. Is that enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's good. It also kind of brings up interesting questions about people who start small businesses. And often as a business coach, when I speak to business owners, the question of why did they start their business comes up all the time. And that is typically the catalyst for having to turn around the business. Oftentimes a business starts, if we want to create a parallel track, the business starts, a career starts at a job, and people go. They have reasons before they start that they want to do that specific thing, or necessities, in some cases, depending on who the person is and what the circumstance is. And then at some point down the road, they determine that they're losing their passion for whatever it is that they're dealing with. And so they forget their why. And so oftentimes, as a business growth and turnaround specialist, one of the things I do is I talk about, why did you start this? What kind of life were you looking for? Why is it so important for people to answer that question in the professional space when they're looking to jump from career to career? What is it that facing that question actually provides that person?
Well, I think I can't remember who said it, so I can't do any attribution, but it was, it's all about how you feel on Sunday night, in terms of what's going to happen on Monday. And I think that, that's where people get stuck. A lot of people are just going through the motions. And I think that if you can latch onto a passion, and I mean, something you love, right, that you're good enough to be able to teach other people how to do it, perhaps. And then you can figure out a way to monetize it. I think that without the passion, I mean, life is just, you're not living, you're just going through the motions. So I don't mean to sound cliche, but I've rediscovered mine a couple of times based on, to your point, circumstances,
Right.
I think it's very important. You don't have to do it, but going to work with a smile on your face, looking forward to things on a day-to-day basis, and understanding you're going to run into bumps. Not everything's going to be rosy every day, but just looking forward to it. And when I ran my company, I loved going into work. I loved teaching people and watching people grow.
What's the biggest challenge that drain people of their positive energy when they go to work for someone?
Well, that kind of leads into the leadership space. I think that what I've seen over the years is that, a lot of people say money's the most important thing. I think it's appreciation, recognition, and the opportunity to be in a continuous new learning environment. I think those are the most important things. And people, when you work for somebody that doesn't acknowledge you, doesn't appreciate you, that drives people away. It's just a matter of time.
So how is it that employees can make themselves more valuable to be appreciated by their employers?
Well, just a couple of things, continuous learning, bring more to the table every day. Don't just wait to be taught. And then I think all employers are looking for people that can solve problems. So develop your critical thinking skills, develop your solution mindset. And I used to tell my employees, you can come into my office anytime and I'll help you with whatever you got going on, but don't just bring me problems. Come to me with your problem and then propose a couple of solutions. And we might not use them, but you need to give those some thought before you dump it on my desk, There's
been thousands of layoffs across the country where people have lost these jobs that were high paying salaries, careers that they thought they'd be in forever, that they thought they would retire at. What's the impact on a person's psychology, in your opinion, after they get laid off? Like, what happens to a person?
Well, it certainly depends on the person, but all you got to do is go on LinkedIn and you can get the answer to that question. It's across the board, and it's in my marketing messaging. People get feelings of shame. They get feelings of anxiety. They get fear, confusion, a lack of clarity. These are all pretty difficult emotions, and if you let them overwhelm you, they'll overwhelm you quickly. And what I bring to that, in my humble opinion, is answers, clarity. Everything's going to be okay. A little bit of support, moral support, right. And then it's strategy and tactics. But some people get really down, and then the other one's desperation, which is unfortunate, because if desperation comes through in an interview, you're not going to get the job. So I talk a lot about that as well.
So how can a person recover from the shame? Let's do a sample session with you. Person gets laid off. They call you up. I'm looking to get back into this, but I feel like my life is, I thought I was better than that. Obviously, I'm not as good as I thought I was because I got laid off, and some of my coworkers still remain at the company. I do, feel a sense of that, hopeless, that, I spent all this money on education, and here I am. I'm on the outside looking in. What would you say to a person like that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say, don't connect it to your ability or the quality of your work. I mean, that's a presumption that's more often than not wrong. So don't beat yourself up. And secondarily, I think getting back to work, and I mean that proverbially, like let's get to work. Let's not sit around and wallow in anything. Let's get moving. And before we get moving, you said you do this. Why were you doing that? And is that what you want to do moving forward? I'd like to have that conversation before we do anything else. So right. I would offer them support and the notion that, there's no such thing as job security. I think we can accept that now. I was aware of that 30 years ago. I don't think there ever has been job security, but
I agree with you.
Today, particularly today, there's just too many things beyond your control. They could acquire another company and you're out of work because you're redundant. I mean, that's got nothing to do with your ability.
Right.
So I would build confidence with things like that and be uplifting. But then we'd have a conversation about the why. Let's talk about what you want to do. What'd you love to do when you were a kid? Let's talk about that in great detail.
What are some of the things that a person has to do in order to get on the path to choosing a career that aligns with them, or just getting back on the horse and getting back in the race for their current occupation, their current industry that they love?
Well, I think I would still put them through the exercise of finding your true purpose. And I have a workbook that I give away for free. It's a very, very simple set of exercises, but it's very difficult. It's self-reflection, and it's 7 questions, and it guides you to a place where you're like, huh. And most people get there. Yeah, Mark, that was very helpful. It was hard. I had to really tell myself some things I didn't want to tell myself and ask some questions that I didn't really want to hear the answers to. But once you have that, then it becomes, okay, let's see where you are, where the world can see you. And LinkedIn is a primary place, because if you're in the professional space, no one's going to talk to you before they look at your LinkedIn profile. So what does that look like? Some people have theirs buttoned up, not many. And so there's a lot. I have a free workbook for that too. Polish up your profile so you can get the right eyes on you. And then, once those things are figured out and you have the geographic restriction, you have the compensation restriction, you have the story, and you have the purpose, then we set a direction and we start moving in that direction. Then it becomes tactical. I'd call the previous stuff strategic.
Why is it so hard for people to be honest with themselves? What do you think it is? Do you think it's just the simple fact of, we have their biases about how we view ourselves? Is that alone the issue? Do we have perceptions of how people, how we think people view us outside of ourselves? Do you think it's something like we have this imposter syndrome that is just not, it's not going away? It just kind of sticks with us. Why is it so hard for people to be honest with themselves and get to a place of ruthless honesty where they can actually make breakthroughs like you're talking about?
Yeah, well, we're getting into psychology now, which I've certainly practiced unofficially for a long time. But what I found, again, over 30, 35 years and having been a father and married and divorced and starting companies, selling companies, there's a lot of experiential stuff in there. I think we all have imposter syndrome. I think we all have inner critics. I think we all talk terribly to ourselves. I don't know who it was that said this, but at TED Talk. You know, if we spoke to other people like we speak to ourselves, we'd be getting in fistfights all day. You know, we're terrible. We're terrible to ourselves. So I think that turn that kind of stuff around, you have to have some kind of reinvigorating habits. Like I took on, I've been an athlete my whole life, but you know, at my age, I can't play full court basketball anymore. And so I go walking and I do yoga and I do breath work and I do meditation. And I think there's a lot of tools. All of those can be done for free. So that's not a restriction. You just have to find, you know, there's a visualization, there's journaling, there's ways to get that inner critic calmed down, right? All of those things, among other things, bring you into a present moment. And we all know what that means. Being in the present, it's a very challenging thing to be in the present all the time because of all the noise.
Right.
But I would, and I have recommended to people the things that I do. Of course, there's what you put in your body. You know, good food makes you more productive, and bad food makes you sad and tired. Moving around, what you put in your body, and then what you let in your eyes and ears. The noise you let in your eyes and ears. So I guess that's control your environment. Don't leave so many things outside of your control. And then when you identify what you can control, don't worry about the other stuff because you can't do anything about it anyway. So that would be my perspective on that.
Were both the companies that you sold technical recruiting firms?
Yes.
And so that means that you obviously have worked with hundreds of applicants. Were you executive recruiting only, or were you all level senior management? What level
No,
did you?
my whole career was technical staffing. So anybody that took the software development lifecycle from quality assurance and business analyst people to senior level solution architects and chief information officers. So all IT related.
And what did you notice about how people showed up? The best ones and the worst ones?
Well, the best ones show up every day, you know, and even when they don't want to, you know, and the best ones are never seeking blame. They're never looking for circumstances or people to lay blame with. They're always going inside saying, how did that happen? How can I keep that from happening again? And what are we going to do about it? What's the solution? And they immediately take that tack. And the worst ones, they think that everything's someone else's fault or something else's fault, and it's a victimhood mentality. And it's really gotten over my career. This is about as bad as that environment has ever been right now, in my estimation.
What causes a person to get sick of what they're doing? That's something that you mentioned on your website as a question for self-reflection to a person who might engage your services. Are you sick of what you're doing? But what causes a person to get sick of what they're doing, that they wake up one day, they're like, this is not for me?
Well, there's a variety of different things. One of the most dangerous things that people do is they compare themselves to other people. That'll make you miserable. I don't care who you are. There's always somebody with a bigger boat and a bigger house and bigger bank account. That's so what. People stick around, and I don't like this phrase toxicity because I think it's abused right now. Mm-hmm. I think we need to remain strong at the same time. But people stick around working for people that they shouldn't be working for. People that are manipulative, people that are toxic, people that are abusive.
You used it.
Yeah. It's a tough one to get around. I just wanted to give it some context before it came out. Yeah, I mean, we all do it, and sometimes time just has to elapse. You know, things. Mm-hmm. I mean, think of what I've been through. You know, transformative moments, if you will. Becoming a father, getting married, doing that backwards, if you will, right? buying my first home, having children, hiring people, firing people, starting a business. I mean, there's all these places where where you're butting up against the harsh reality of where you are.
Right.
Oftentimes that forces you to reflect on something that you wouldn't have otherwise. It's like people don't start taking care of themselves until they get sick. You know,
Mhm.
it's like it's similar to that. So it could be internal, it could be circumstantial.
Yeah, that's it's very interesting that people allow you know it's money without self confidence. Money dictates everything that you do, and to some degree. And I think that that happens whether you work for someone or whether you're a small business owner. There are small business owners that have customers that just run right over them as well
Hmm.
because they know that they have to make payroll or their rent or whatever the case is, and they just allow it to happen. I've seen it
Yeah.
a lot over the years. In that companies that you're talking about where people work that have this environment that's hostile to some degree or at least uncomfortable or at least not exactly engaging for them to be at and not instructive.
Hmm.
They end up questioning and doubting themselves. I wonder if there's this like circular logical reasoning that they encounter about why they're there, right? I need the money. Normally I don't put up with this, but I'm putting up with it now. But then one day it just there's something that just causes a person to say, "That's it, I'm gone." Um, why do you think that more people don't, for instance, if they like what they do, but they don't like their company and their boss, that they don't maybe speak up in the office environment? Do you think that it the office environment is so far gone now that um, there's the risk to reward is just too great for them to say something?
You know, it's another kind of pseudo psychological question why people do what they do. Um, I said it earlier. I think that we put ourselves in boxes, and it's difficult to get out. And it's also how you were raised. You know, it's also all the stuff that's in your subconscious from your youth and your teenage years, and whether your parents had an abundant mentality with regard to money or they had a scarcity mentality. I mean, my parents were depression babies. They both had scarcity challenges. My dad made really good money, but
Right.
he was very frugal. He was generous but frugal, and extravagance was a third pair of jeans. You
Mm.
know, so it's perspective, it's history, it's the unconscious biases that we develop as kids,
Right.
based on where we grew up and whether we played sports or musician or it's so many different things. But it reminds me, Mike, of a story real quickly. When I first found my mentor, the first company that I was an owner of, I was a minority owner, and the guy that funded the company taught me how to build a staffing company and sell a staffing company. And after about 4 years, we parted ways. He gave me a big fat check, and I started my own company. So, but very early on with him, he was a very, very bright guy.
Mhm.
And I'm very glad that I bumped into him. But very early on, he came out onto the sales floor. And at that point, I was a sales manager. We hadn't yet started the contract staffing company. We were placing people permanently. And he asked me eventually if I wanted to help him do what we eventually did. But he came out on the sales floor and he started yelling at me like
Mhm.
loudly. And to this day, I don't remember why. He didn't really need a reason. He,
Mhm.
he had a manipulative streak that he was masterful at.
Mhm.
And I had a baby. I had no other way of making money. I was completely dependent on him. And after he was done yelling, I said, "Can I talk to you in your office?" And we went into his office, and I said, "Look, I really appreciate that you signed my paycheck. I really appreciate all the wisdom that you're sharing with me, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love it.
Mhm.
But if you ever yell at me in front of anybody again, I'm going to walk out that door, and you'll never see me again."
Mhm.
And I tell that story to people because it's not like I'm Braveheart or anything. It was just deep down inside. I was like, you can't treat me that way. And
Right.
in my opinion, if everyone could build the courage to do that, I didn't insult him. I pulled him into private. I told him how much I appreciated everything, but I also told him, you just can't treat me like that.
Right.
And our relationship completely changed.
Mm.
We talk to this day. He made me a lot of money and I made him a lot of money. So, you know, we all probably get to a point where we should have a conversation with somebody that's scary like that. Because if I lost that job, I don't know what I would have done. But I knew deep down inside I would have figured it out.
Right. I have a similar story. I once, when I was working at a retail place, and that's when I was younger, but I've always been fairly confident in myself, or at least self-assured enough to be able to stand up for myself. And I remember one day, kind of similar to your story, I had manager on the floor in front of everyone yelled at me about something that was trivial, that could have just been a side conversation or a quick conversation. Now, mind you, I used to get to work early all the time. I would get to work half an hour early. And the reason why is because I like sitting there, just relaxing myself before the shift started. And so I was never late. I always showed up on time. I always did the job how I was supposed to do the job. And I remember one time they just went off on me. So I asked my manager if I could speak to her in a room, right, into the office or whatever. And so I said to her something similar to what you said, but it was more like, I'm going to give you the courtesy that you didn't give me, which is that if you have something, I said, I'm a reasonable guy. If you have something that I honestly need to work on, something that you want to communicate to me, then you can just do it directly to me in private and I'll work on it. There's no reason to call me out in front of other people. There's no reason to go down that road because you're going to elicit a response that is just going to go back and forth, and both of us are going to be looked at in a negative way. The best way to communicate to other people is how you would want, it's the golden rule comes into play, right? It's like you would want someone to take you to the side and explain to you exactly kind of what, what the deal was, and that allows for private correction where it needs to be. And it wasn't like a little public teasing where you're teasing someone for not doing something. And yeah, there's going to be a little guilt associated with kind of laying them out in that particular way. But, but yelling at someone in front of other people is pushing them down to make yourself feel better, which is what I thought that she was doing. And so when I explained it to her, she actually apologized, which I found, I don't know if I got anything out of her apology, but at least the fact she recognized that she should have gone about doing that in a different way. And, if you're working at a place, in my opinion, where you feel that stress, I think having those honest conversations one-on-one in an appropriate setting, which in my opinion is typically individual to individual and not on a group level, not trying to be, I noticed that because I've never had a job. I've had a job when I was younger, but like I've owned my own business for most of my adult life. Yeah. What I find is that there's a lot of snide comments, backhanded compliments. There's a lot of rejoinders to comments that people make in meetings that are meant to snipe at someone. And all that does is create more and more internal tension. And people stop acting like adult humans and they start acting like, little teenage kids that do this backbiting thing and reputation destruction. And I wonder, it's just unfortunate that the culture of these companies are kind of generate that kind of environment.
Well, I think, it makes me think of the times that I had to fire people, which if you own a company, you're going to have to fire people. It's, you want to keep that on a minimum percentage basis, but you let them have their dignity. There's no reason to take someone's dignity away just because they don't work in your environment. And I used to tell people, look, we sat down, we set expectations from the get-go. They were clear. We made sure we were both on the same page. We set you in motion. We supported you with resources and training. Right. And then you got to a point where you just weren't hitting it. And so we had to address it. And we sat you down and we gave you a probationary period and a plan. And we're going to sit down again at the end of that plan, or perhaps before that plan's coming, and see, are we trending up or is this still not working? And then if it's not working, we'll part ways. And I hope that doesn't happen. But that's that. I'm not telling you what you want to hear. I'm telling you the truth, right? Yeah. And that I'm obligated to tell you the truth out of respect for you. And then I would say in the separation exit interview, I would just say, look, the way that I do things is not the only way to do things. Okay. Mm-hmm. So what you probably should do is find an environment that suits you better. My environment doesn't suit you as well. So then I take a little responsibility for that, which softens the blow. But to me, it's all about letting someone keep his dignity.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with that. And actually, I use that statement exactly with, some of the, some of my business coaching clients, and I've written about it as well, about, dignity is really important. You don't have to crush someone in order to make a point. You can just make your point and just make sure your point is understood, and then you can kind of move on. But how can a person who is currently feeling trapped at a job that they semi hate, I don't know if it's semi hate or semi love, I'm not exactly sure. I guess that's a half glass empty, half full thing. But how can they find, like you talked about, when you might have had to let someone go, find a place where you feel like you could be valued and where your skill set can go further. How can a person find that career that they love? What do they need to do? Is it just about journaling and self-honesty, or are there more practical things?
Yeah, well, I think there's internal work you can do, which we talked about, and then there's external work. I think people, in my experience, most people like to help,
Yeah.
but most people also don't like to ask for help. So that's kind of an interesting paradox. I think, and I'm sure I can tell by talking to you that you have no problems asking people questions. You have no problems putting yourself in risky situations as long as you've mitigated the risk to your self-satisfaction. So it's like, you got to get out there. I used to tell people, we teach people how to referralize at the end of, when you place somebody, it's like, well, I just help you find a job. Who else do you know that I should be talking to? And it's not, do you know anyone else?
Mhm.
That's a yes or no. You never do that.
Right.
It's, who else do you know? I presume you know people. And if someone said to me, yeah, I can't think of anybody, my big joke was always, man, you can't think of anybody right now? You got to get out more and make them laugh.
Right.
And
Yeah.
keep the conversation going. So really, with the access to information that we have right now, one of the things that drives me insane on LinkedIn is two things: the open to work or open to network badge. That says I'm desperate, and people don't understand that. They don't like it when I tell them that. I'm like, you don't have to believe me, but you're perceived. That's a desperate move, and
Yeah.
at least half the population is going to agree with me, right?
Yeah.
So, and what value does it bring you? No one's coming to you because you're looking for work. People are coming to you because you look like you might be what they need. That has nothing to do with your status. So, that's something that, and then the standard way of looking for work is putting your resume together to the best of your abilities, or making the mistake of paying someone to do that for you, which I'll do for free in 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And then just shooting it all over the place, shotgunning resumes. And it's just like, and then complaining about not getting feedback. I'm like, half those jobs aren't even open, right?
Yeah. Right.
And the first set of eyes that's going to look at your resume isn't qualified to look at your resume.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's so true. Yeah, we had a viewer just write into the show while we were talking. They said, "Hello there. This stream was randomly recommended to me by YouTube, yet it hits so close to home. I'm struggling exactly with semi-hate, feeling stuck at my job." Yeah, obviously this is a ubiquitous feeling that people feel across the board.
it is, Micah. It is. It's just that it's also a difficult thing to share with people. There's a level of embarrassment to it. But when you again, in my experience, when you make yourself available to people,
Yep.
what I find is most people are struggling with the same things I'm struggling with, and most people are struggling with the same things everyone's struggling with.
Right.
There's nuances. Women have certain things that are different than men.
Sure.
What age you are, what culture you're from, your religious beliefs. There's all influences there.
Right.
We're all human,
Exactly. No, that's true. When you peel off the outer layer of our skin, you were to just have us walking around like the sack of meat that we are, we would all require the same needs. Now, like you mentioned, there might be some subculture things that might be slightly different based off of where we grew up and that. But at the end of the day, even the needs in a subculture are typically human defined, and they line up together like across culture. So there's another question here. So they asked, how do you set a stronger frame on LinkedIn? How do you, I guess what he's asking is, how do you kind of get solid on LinkedIn so that people can actually might be able to to find you or to recognize your skill set?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that teach people how to build their profiles. Again, I have a free workbook that you can get on my website for that. Before I did anything, I would at least do that. Go look at my profile, and you're not going to use my content, but you can use my framework. Look at what I'm doing. Ask yourself, why is he doing that? Why does it look like that? Why is he saying that like that? And I tell people all the time, plagiarism is only plagiarism when you're in school. Everything I know, I learned from someone else.
Yeah.
That's not stealing, but I've made it my own. You can't get what I'm selling from anybody but me, because it's coming from me. It's mine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you got to get more of a. There's plenty of room for everybody. We need everyone.
Right.
And most people, that box thing again. They're like, this is mine. This is mine. So there's a lot of. I would go. Certainly, you can take a look at mine. Certainly, you can download the free workbook. And but it's you look at that from step out of your own shoes and say, okay, if I was hiring me, what would I want to see? So there's some self-reflection stuff, there's some guidebooks, and there's some people out there that you can talk to about it. Bounce it off somebody you trust who's not like you or me, but you don't have to be like you or me to be able to be helpful.
Yeah.
Those are a few thoughts.
And what I'll do is I'll put the link to your free workbook in the description of the live video, and the if you're listening to this on audio, it will be in the description of that as well. So you'll be able to find the workbook that Mark is talking about right now. So
thank you.
Of course, and it's so funny that sometimes we get so caught up in our heads that we miss the obvious questions, which is, if I was hiring, like you were a technical recruiter, so the people that you hired had a certain skill set that needed to be specialized, or they had to have specialized experience normally to get hired. And so what I think about is, what are some of the questions you've had to answer already in the jobs that you've done, that people have asked you to do on a regular basis in the course of your job, that you think that might be asked again of you in the future? And if you can answer those questions before you even get there, it seems like that's the right step towards creating for yourself an attractive profile on LinkedIn. What is it that people might be just looking in a person who's going to be filling your role? A business analyst, financial analyst, someone who knows CRM systems, someone who is some kind of process engineer that can work at Neuralink, for Elon Musk, right? Like you have to be able to answer these questions in advance, based off of some of your past history of being in that role already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the other thing people do is they kind of, for some reason, they think that interviewing and looking for work is something that comes natural to them. There's no preparation. There's no practice. I mean, very few people practice interviews. I tell people you should get in front of a mirror, a microphone and a recorder, whatever technology can allow you to play it back. You should do it to your mom. You should do it to your friends. Get people's feedback.
Right.
Because we're not very good self-critics. None of us are, right? And you don't know. I mean, I'm old enough that when I played baseball growing up, no one ever filmed me. I never saw myself swing a bat. I never saw myself throw a pitch. That would have been helpful, Yeah. So don't just go looking for work. Stop, reflect, conclude, and then practice,
It's interesting you say that, because I think about your role. You see so many people that you must get so good at reading body language. You look at the resume, their profile on LinkedIn, especially now. Not that you're still doing this. Of course, you sold the businesses, but like if you were to advise someone, you probably got so good at reading the body language and kind of what they're putting out there about themselves at the beginning that you could just thumb through 15 resumes or interviews, like interviews within the first 3 to 5 minutes. You already know if a person was a good fit or not. What can people do? What's a suggestion, for instance, that you would give someone within the first couple minutes or 3 minutes? I say what to do. I'm going to ask what not to do when they first come in and sit down, and this is something that they're trying to change to, a career that they're trying to change to. They're trying to break through. They got up to self-confidence. They've done the work. They've gone through your workbooks. They've done some of the work, and here they are at the job. What are some of the things that you wouldn't do at the beginning, other than saying, I used to be a serial killer?
Yeah, no, and again, I'm not tooting my own horn because I got a free video on my YouTube channel that's 13 tips to crushing your next job interview. And those are 13 things that you would probably, after watching that, I think it's a 15-minute video I shot like 5 years ago. And that's the other cool thing about what I do. It's evergreen. It's always going to help. It's not dependent on technology or anything. It goes down, it's the small things, it's like, I've taught people how to look another person in the eye and shake their hand firmly, right? I can't tell you how many, 250-pound football players will give you a wet noodle handshake. It's just like, come on, man. First impressions are everything. Look people in the eye. The way you stand, the way that you sit, be attentive, pay attention. Right? You should have a notepad and pen in front of you, or an iPad, whatever, with at least 10 questions to ask the person that you're talking to. Because if you don't have questions, you're not interested, right? So I could go on this one for like hours, but some of it's just like, to your point, be on time.
Yeah.
If you're going to be more than 5 minutes late, you have to call, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Giving, but after 5-10 minutes, it becomes rude. It becomes disrespectful. So, and sometimes I find myself thinking, like, am I talking to my kid right now, or who? I'm being a dad.
Right. Yeah. It is funny how people descend into like, and they use the word fillers and the word whiskers, right? The like, ahs. Like you said, and that's where the practice comes in, right? Because you eliminate those things from your speech, and obviously, the more prominent your role in the company, typically, what's going to be expected of you is, I've been a founder, CEO. I'm currently a CEO, and I do other fractional executive work. And what's going to be expected from you in some of your explanations and your demonstrations, if you're doing a demonstrative, if you're presenting to a group of people who are decision makers, is that you can deliver the information without saying, I put this presentation together, and then I had totally a randomly awesome time doing this, and it was so cool, that I'm beside myself, and I'm like aghast at the experience. You have to be able to speak in a way that communicates but also doesn't distract, from people.
Like, to your point, it's practice, and you can be forgiving of people. We're not perfect,
right?
But it's nice when you have someone come into an interview and you're the interviewer, which I've been thousands of times,
right?
And be able to look the person across from you and say, this person is timely, they're interested, they're interesting, they're prepared, and they're respecting my time. That's huge, and anyone can do that.
So one of our viewers say preparing for a job interview is good advice. I agree. And the fact that we're not very good at self-analysis is golden. Very important in sales too, rewatching meetings, etc. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. All right. We've gotten to the point of our podcast where it's time to do something a little fun, which is a little departure from what we do on a regular basis, which is to look at TikToks, which is obviously fun. I let the Chinese steal my information so that I can share TikToks with the world during interviews. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some TikToks. Some of these are about changing careers, advice, getting unstuck, and you're going to give us your advice. You're going to tell us what your brutal, honest opinion is over what these people are saying. So let me just cue it up. All right.
So, how to get unstuck. Notice when you are stuck, when you get the same thought over and over. Distract yourself. Like if you get the same thought 3 times, get up physically and go do something different. That can be so helpful. And find ways to boost serotonin. Either serotonin mood support can help, exercise can help, bright light therapy can help. When you boost serotonin, you become more flexible and less stuck.
Okay, what do you think about that physical advice there?
Yeah, I mean, I gave some of it earlier. I think I don't have any problem with anything he said. I think there's a lot more to it than that, but that's a good start. And those things are very simple. So I like simplicity.
Yeah, it's true that simple is often good. All right, here's our next bit of advice here.
Things that you find easy should be your first question, not what do you like or what do you want to do or even what do you care about. Those are interesting questions. They're to some extent fabricated in the picture that we paint of ourselves. What do you find easy is a question that's open, and I think most people can find a way of answering that, whether you think you're good at stuff or not. Because I'm not asking you about what your capability is, I'm asking about what do you find easy. Things that you find easy.
All right, what do you think about this piece of advice?
Yeah, that's an interesting. I mean, I like shaking the can up. Doing something different. That's a different approach. I could argue that, but I don't feel compelled to because I don't think she's incorrect.
Yeah.
I think you should face up to things that you find hard often as well. That's how you get better. But
Right.
she's not incorrect.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, all right, and we have one more here.
How do you get past stuck? Stuck is just a feeling. Stuck is your inability to see past your current struggle. I'm Laura St. John. I'm a celebrity mindset coach. I teach you the steps to get unstuck so you can manifest your dreams faster. Unstuck is also a feeling. Stop trying to take action from point A to move into point B because you're bringing the stuck energy into your decisions. Allow yourself the space to see past, through, or beyond your current struggle. How do you get
All right, so this is probably a bit more esoteric than some of the other advice that we got.
That's being kind.
I was reaching for an adjective to describe the advice, but
With all due respect to her, I'm sure she's a wonderful woman. That doesn't attract me.
all right. So what is your counterpoint to what she said?
I need more meat. I mean, that's not. She didn't really say anything. You know, your esoteric's perfect. That's exactly what it was.
It was very woo-woo sticks advice, I guess.
That's not. It's not wrong. It just doesn't. I'm sure there are a lot of people that respond to that kind of thing. It's off-putting to me. To be frank.
So, I heard what she said, and so part of it, I guess, is visualizing yourself past whatever the sticking point is. I guess maybe there's some utility in, projecting down the road a bit to kind of see yourself in the place that you want to be. If we're trying to find a nugget in some of that very, that cloud of advice, but what role does seeing yourself in a future position, career path, small business, life, accomplished goal play in the decisions that you make today?
I'm a big proponent of the fact that if you can treat that visualization exercise with intention and consistency, then it's extremely valuable. I do believe we can become who we are effectively by practicing who we want to be as if it were happening right now. And there's techniques for that. You can abuse that. There are ineffective ways to do that. But if you get into a groove with visualization, I think it's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, it has to be realistic, right? I assume that's kind of where you were going with that. It can't be, I see myself running this Fortune 500 in the next 15 years, because that may not necessarily be a realistic path for you.
Yeah, it's a balance between you got to reach big, but you have to be realistic, and that's a kind of a delicate balance.
Right, and I guess that comes down to some of the work that you were talking about earlier that you have to do with self-honesty and transparency about your goals and what you want.
Yep.
So, Mark, where can individuals who are watching this? Obviously, we have people who are watching this from around the world who are looking in, who feel stuck. How can they reach out to you if they're looking for advice to get to the other side of their self-doubt, their angst, or their frustration?
Yeah, I think the simplest thing is to find me on LinkedIn. I have a pretty unique last name, and it's my last name .mark at the end of the LinkedIn URL. You can get access to my website from there, my YouTube channel from there. You can get the workbooks there. I even put my phone number in my contact information, and people aren't abusing that. Well, I didn't know what was going to happen, but yeah, I hope I've made myself easy to find. And I also think for anybody who wants to know more without paying anything yet, there's a lot of free stuff on my different platforms that's, I think, valuable.
Awesome. And of course, I will move that information to the description of this this podcast on YouTube and on audio version as well. So awesome, Mark. It has been a pleasure. I mean, this issue of being stuck and feeling stuck is it can be crippling to some people, and it's hard for them to move on.
It is.
And so I'm happy that coaches like you who have gone through things, and sometimes it's easy to kind of talk to people who are in the profession, but when you find out they haven't really gone through much, it kind of leaches into their advice. Like they kind of let it leak a little bit that there's not much that they've gone through. But
I try to stay as practical as possible. I try to stay away from theoretical. That's what put me off about that woman. It was theoretical. But anyway, no, it's been a pleasure, Mike. I really enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we could talk for hours about this stuff.
absolutely, I find the psychology of this and the actual reality of this fascinating, because like even as a business owner, it's important for you to understand how you can set up the environment for your employees so that they don't feel this way, so that you're always measuring how their output and how they feel against the culture that you're starting, and how you can make refinements to that to make them feel more engaged. And we are living in with more Gen Z coming into the workforce now, and then later younger millennials than I'm a zillennial. I just found out, so I am a Gen X and a millennial at the same time. But like the younger millennials and the Gen Z that are in the workforce are a lot less focused on the reward aspect of working now, and they're more focused on what they get out of it in a mental, refreshing kind of lifestyle sort of way. I think than any generation that came before. As long as you pay me, I'm showing up, whether I hate it or not.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could do another one of these podcasts and delve into some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Mark. Well, thank you for coming on. And once again, if you're watching this and you enjoy this conversation, make sure you like the video, because liking this video helps YouTube to understand that you appreciate the content that we're putting out. Don't forget to subscribe as well, so you can be notified when I have more podcasts that comes out. In fact, it's going to be another one again next Thursday. So thank you, Mark Aylward, for coming on, founder of 7 Pillars, business personal coach extraordinaire, career development coach, and his information will be in the description for this podcast. Don't forget, if you don't go about doing your business, you're going to be going about doing the business of someone else. I appreciate you for watching. Thank you, Mark, once again. And for Mark, I'm Micah. We're out of here.